Chandran. It's just after 2 a.m. in New Delhi, 3:30 in the afternoon in Washington, D.C. and you're watching a special broadcast here on DD India. Over the next several hours, we'll get you the latest on India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the US. He reached Washington, D.C. from the French port city of Marseille. Remember, he was on a 3-day visit to France where he co-chaired an AI summit in Paris along with President Emmanuel Macron. We'll connect with our correspondents in Washington, D.C. in a bit. We'll also have guests join us from India and the US to put this visit in its proper context for you. They'll tell you about why India-US ties are consequential not just for the two countries in question, but also for the rest of the world. All right then, let's get started. So the stage is set for the much anticipated Modi-Trump talks. The Indian Prime Minister would become only the fourth foreign leader to meet with Trump since his inauguration on 20th January. Now, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump will hold a one-on-one meeting followed by talks that will include their respective delegations. In fact, I can tell you that the Indian leader would be reaching the White House in a few minutes from now. They'll be holding a joint news conference towards the end of their talks. That's expected in a little more than an hour from now. We'll get you that live as well. Also expected is a news briefing by India's Ministry of External Affairs. And to cap it all, President Trump will host a dinner for the Indian leader. Now, Prime Minister Modi, who is staying at the Blair House in the heart of Washington, D.C., will also hold bilateral talks with Trump at the White House. It is Prime Minister Modi's first bilateral visit to the U.S. since Trump was sworn in for his second term. Since November 2024, Modi and Trump have spoken on the phone twice. The Prime Minister has described Trump as a friend and emphasized on the opportunity to build upon past successes while deepening bilateral ties. Let me now give you an overview of the India-US relations. India and the US share a comprehensive global strategic partnership driven by democratic values, shared interests, and vibrant people-to-people contacts. The US is not only India's largest trading partner, it's also been a part and parcel of India's growth and its developmental journey over the years. Syed Absarul Hassan reports.
The United States enjoy a comprehensive global strategic partnership covering almost all areas of human endeavor, and this driven by shared democratic values, convergence of interest on a range of issues, and vibrant people-to-people connects. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's recent visit to the United States underscores further strengthening of bilateral ties with a focus on trade, defense, energy, and technology. Cooperation in counter-terrorism is one of the pillars of the bilateral partnership, featuring information exchange, capacity building, operational cooperation, and regular dialogue through the India-US Joint Working Group on Counter-Terrorism. In 2017, both sides initiated a dialogue on domestic and international terrorist designations listing proposals. Education partnership is an important pillar of Indo-US ties with strong linkages and history of higher education collaborations. Both countries support scholarships and grants to US and Indian scholars, professionals, and students. Global Initiative of Academic Networks, or GIAN, was launched by India in 2015 to facilitate visits by 1,000 US teachers annually to teach in India. India-US defense cooperation is based on new framework. On July 30, 2018, India was moved into the Tier 1 of the US Department of Commerce's Strategic Trade Authorization License exception. The United States is the largest trading partner of India. Bilateral trades in goods and services stood at $190.1 billion US for the calendar year 2023. During the financial year 2023-24, US was the third largest source of FDI into India with inflows of US dollars, 4.9 billion US dollars, accounting for almost 9% of the total FDI equity inflows. Cultural cooperation between two countries is rich and manifests in diverse ways. There are India-focused educational programs in universities and educational institutions. Indian embassies and consulates organize various cultural events to showcase diverse facets of Indian culture. Sayyid Absarul Hassan for DD India.
All right, joining us are our guests Sanjay Bhattacharya and Shashwat Kumar. Mr. Bhattacharya is a former Indian ambassador to Egypt, Turkey, and Switzerland. Mr. Kumar is a fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Also joining us momentarily would be Atul Keshup. He is the president of the Washington, D.C. based U.S.-India Business Council. He is a former U.S. diplomat who has served in India. Gentlemen, welcome to this special broadcast. If I can start with you, Ambassador Bhattacharya, what would the two leaders discuss when they meet in a short while from now?
I'm sorry, the sound is not coming through.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, now it's better.
Great. Good to have you join this broadcast, Ambassador Bhattacharya. I meant to ask you, what would the two principals, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, would they be discussing when they meet in a short while from now?
Well, as you know, the Prime Minister and President Trump have a very special relationship. They have engaged in the past as well when President Trump was in his first tenure. And there was a very solid partnership that had been built up at that time. So this visit acquires very specific importance because Prime Minister is going to be one of the earliest foreign leaders to meet with President Trump. There are a range of issues on the two sides would wish to cooperate. And to my mind, the key issues would be on trade, technology, on security, and on strategic cooperation.
Right. Mr. Kumar, coming to you now as someone who has been tracking India-US relations from very close quarters. India, we are told, enjoys bipartisan support in the US. So can we expect continuity in US policies towards India? No major changes or radical departures from the past?
No, I don't think there would be any radical departures from the past. In fact, if you look at the relationship, the way it has evolved over past 20, 25 years, it's been an incremental growth, which has been added each year. Some new area for cooperation have been introduced in this partnership. So it has a very solid, I would say, a base and a background for this partnership. So I don't expect, it's a partnership which I would say it did not start with a bang and just fizzled away. It has built on a strength from every year, from every administration. So we expect the continuity. Also, I would say that in this particular meeting between Prime Minister and the President Trump, as Ambassador Bhattacharya pointed out, there would be 4 to 5 areas of engagement. But my sense is it would be a roadmap that both leaders would engage on because it's still very early in Trump administration. The confirmations for these cabinet level secretaries are still happening. So at this point, it makes sense that both leaders agree on a framework for a roadmap for over next 4 to 5 years of engagement, and that's what I expect at the end of this meeting. Say in maybe an hour and a half from now, a joint statement when they will be given. I expect something on these lines, announcements to be.
Fair enough. On that note, may I, Ambassador Bhattacharya, dive straight into what we've heard most recently from a U.S. official who was engaging in a background briefing with journalists covering the Prime Minister's ongoing visit to the US. And if I can quote from a relevant news report, it says the Trump administration wants to, 1, bring down the US trade deficit with India. Number 2, have a fair bilateral trade deal. 3, build on defense sales. 4, prioritize American technology. And number 5, sign a new defense framework. Your thoughts on some of these issues that the US official has said just moments ago?
Yes, exactly. I think the priorities from both sides will converge, particularly when we look at the issues pertaining to our economic cooperation as well as our strategic coordination in the new times. On the economic cooperation, obviously, there are two elements that I think would be significant. The first would be of the trade relations. As you are aware, our trade partnership is quite high, though the Americans have sometimes complained that the trade balance is not quite in their favor. And there is probably some wiggle room on that, and tariffs would be one of the issues that could come up for discussion in that particular context. In this context, also, what is important to note is that the US has become increasingly a larger energy partner of India. And this includes both the hydrocarbon sector as well as the non-fossil fuels. So I would expect that this is something that will go in accordance with our objectives on the energy transformation that we are also seeking to achieve. Linked to this would also be the kind of defense relationship, because over time, in recent years in particular, we have been acquiring larger amounts of US military hardware. And so that is something that could actually be propped up. There are many new ideas that have come about on the table, and some of those would definitely be discussed tomorrow. But I think the biggest prospect is the way in which our technology cooperation go forward. We have come together on the critical and emerging technologies in order to make sure that our value and supply chains remain reliable and effective and efficient. And these are some of the areas where I expect there would be much more significant. And, if you had to look at the breakthroughs, so to say, these would be the areas where a lot of discussion has already taken place, but we could get to the next level. And of course, finally, I think related to the defense aspects would be the emergence of the Indo-Pacific and how we take that idea forward. That would be another very significant thing that I would wish to mention at this point.
Indeed. And before I delve into the specifics of the India-US bilateral ties, namely defense and security, trade and investment, people-to-people ties, energy security, science and technology, and so on and so forth, Mr. Kumar, if I can come back to you very briefly for your comment on what the unnamed official said with regard to another key issue. And here I am paraphrasing this official. He or she says, we expect continued cooperation with India on potential Chinese security issues. Can we expect the talk to focus also to some extent on the Indo-Pacific in general and China in particular?
Certainly, US and India, security concerns against China, and especially when it comes to supply chains. And this is something which cuts across all the sectors, especially clean energy and technology. A pivot away from China has been a cornerstone of US-India relationship. And given that the Trump administration's current picks are China hawks, I expect the continuity to be there on that angle. And which also brings me to the fact that I think also Mr. Bhattacharya pointed out on the clean energy part. I will add that, in addition to hydrocarbons, nuclear will also be in a big way on the table between the two countries, and the trade transfer for technology. India needs a lot of clean technology for its own needs. Manufacturing needs to happen. We have seen in the past that US-led Development Finance Corporation has supported a build out of manufacturing facilities in India by First Solar and Tata Power. So I expect on these lines the continuity to be there, and a lot of these asks from India on the US, because pivot away from China is something which has brought these two countries together, and it's going to be an axis on which cooperation will continue.
Right, so we've heard your opening remarks, Mr. Kumar and Ambassador Bhattacharya. I'll come back to you momentarily. I want to go across to my colleague Shubhendu Ghosh, who is standing by in Washington, D.C. as we speak. Shubhendu, if you can hear me, can I begin by asking about your thoughts before we get to the Modi-Trump talks? Why don't you walk our viewers through the meetings that Prime Minister Modi has had so far? Who all has he met, and how did those talks go?
That's right. Good afternoon from Washington, D.C. Ramesh, a number of key bilateral meetings had taken place. So, with the head of departments and ministries in the new Trump government here in the United States. It started with Prime Minister Narendra Modi last evening, just after reaching Washington, D.C., meeting Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, earlier this morning. He met Michael Waltz, the NSA of the United States. He also had a meeting with Elon Musk. That was a special one. Elon Musk had in fact come with his family and children. So that was a special meeting there. So we see the key leaders in the Trump administration there calling on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Remember, it's a new regime coming into power. Each of the departments directly reaching out to Prime Minister, updating him about their priorities, the manner in which they would want to take the relations and ties with India to the next level. And this is all ahead of the big meeting of Prime Minister Narendra Modi with President Donald Trump at the White House. Number of issues in focus, but what our guests earlier mentioned, that given that the expectations are so high, and this is just the first meeting of Prime Minister Narendra Modi with the new administration, with Trump 2.0 administration, the focus is going to be to get that roadmap in place, which is going to determine the manner in which the two countries, the global strategic partners, are going to chart the next 4 years. So in that sense, those broader contours in focus, but also particular specifics about trade, energy, innovation, and also the word that we've heard so often in the past few days and weeks, tariffs. How are they accommodated in that convergence of thoughts, ideas and action for these two countries?
Now, Shubhendu, I wouldn't want us to second guess what the two principals will discuss, but what are some of the issues that will be foremost in their minds when they sit down for the talks?
Predominantly, we can see, Ramesh, that trade relations between the two countries, first, the high points. America already is the largest trading partner for India, and also if you look at the foreign direct investments, it comes among the top three. In that sense, the bilateral trade engagement is already a very, very significant one. President Trump overall, not specifically with India, has raised concerns about tariffs. We've also seen India making those concessions in the budget. We've seen especially luxury expensive bikes from United States are going to be easier for American manufacturers to export to India. Those tariffs have been brought down. So in that sense, there is a positive vibe between India and United States to take forward the trade relations. There is also the issue of immigration. Those concerns have to be sorted. But remember, what these two countries are known for today are as strategic partners, and the significance that Indo-Pacific acquires in today's time, the manner in which their cooperation is going to be taken forward in this region in particular and at multilateral forums in general, is going to be particularly something that one has to look forward to. The personal rapport, the warmth that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Donald Trump share for one another, we've seen that on display in Trump 1.0, and in this new government, we'll have to see how that plays out. Those initial visuals of the two leaders meeting, what is their body language going to be, all of that is going to be very, very significant for us to look out for.
Indeed, Shubhendu, since you referred to those meetings that the Prime Minister has had so far in Washington, D.C., let me pull up some more information on them one by one for the benefit of our viewers joining us. Do stay on. I'll come back to you in just a bit. But first, viewers, U.S. National Security Advisor Michael Waltz called on Prime Minister Modi. Their discussions touched upon ways to further deepen the India-U.S. comprehensive global strategic partnership, with a particular focus on strategic technologies as well as defense industrial cooperation and civil nuclear energy, with an emphasis on small modular reactors and counter-terrorism. They also discussed about international and regional issues of mutual interest. Next, the head of the U.S. Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, and the CEO of Tesla, Elon Musk, called on Prime Minister Modi. Now, Prime Minister Modi and Musk discussed about strengthening collaboration between Indian and US entities in innovation, space exploration, artificial intelligence, and sustainable development. Their discussions also touched upon opportunities to deepen their cooperation in emerging technologies, entrepreneurship, and good governance. Musk was accompanied by his family to this meeting. And then we had entrepreneur and politician Vivek Ramaswamy call on Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Washington, D.C. They spoke about diverse issues, including innovation and culture, among others. They had insightful discussions on India-US ties, biotechnology, and the role of entrepreneurship in shaping the future. Ramaswamy was accompanied by his father-in-law to the meeting. And US Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard called on Prime Minister Modi as well. The Prime Minister fondly recalled his past interactions with her. Their discussions touched upon enhancing bilateral intelligence cooperation, particularly in counterterrorism, cybersecurity, emerging threats, and strategic intelligence sharing. They also exchanged views on regional and global developments of mutual interest, reaffirming their commitment to a secure, stable, and rules-based international order. Let me bring in my guests back in the discussion. Ambassador Bhattacharya, your thoughts on the series of meetings that the PM has had so far, including with the officials from the Trump cabinet. This was a get-to-know sort of a meeting?
So, as you can imagine, since in a sense this is a new administration, although all the characters of the new administration have been known to the Indian side for a long time, and External Affairs Minister had met with his counterpart just soon after the inauguration, and the Quad meeting was held as well. Defense Minister had a conversation with his counterpart not so long ago. And there have been numerous interactions already, and there's been intense preparation for this very significant visit. And quite apart from the fact that, of course, Prime Minister and President Trump are familiar to each other. So although it's a new administration, in a sense, many of the characters are known to each other. But I think it was important to reinforce the direction in which the two sides wish to go. We have witnessed for a very long time the very wide bipartisan support that we've had. But the new Trump administration provides us with a new opportunity so that we can go ahead with our objectives. As you know, we are embarked currently on the Viksit Bharat agenda. And in many ways, the US support and US participation in this would be very crucial. And I think what Prime Minister is doing is making sure that the US is fully on board. And I think that's the broad agenda under which our priorities are going forward, quite as much as we mesh in with the American priorities at the same time. And therefore, these various sectoral meetings or these sessions with the various new department heads are extremely crucial.
Absolutely. Mr. Kumar, I want you to weigh in on this new role that we see Elon Musk in. He seems to be everywhere. One day he is heckling or trolling leaders in Germany or Britain or even far off South Africa. On the other day, other days he's seen taking on or talking about corruption in US agencies, including US aid. He's talking about cutting down the government in his role as the chief of the Department of Government Efficiency. What should one make of Trump's new role in Trump 2.0?
Oh, I mean, I think as you laid out the four different hats that Mr. Elon Musk is wearing at this point, if we're focused at bringing efficiency into the government, I mean, the mandate that President Trump has to cut down the government expenses. But I would say that his role in Trump 2.0 maybe from India's point of view, it's a good role to be in, because I think as a private investor, as a tech entrepreneur, as someone who owns Tesla, who has been in negotiation with Government of India for market entry for quite some time, at the same time also owns and operates Starlink, which is again in talks with India for entry into the Indian market. So I think overall he could be one of the person who could bridge the private sector partnership between two sides. At the same time, as Mr. Bhattacharya rightly pointed out, that government of India needs, and Prime Minister understands that for India's Viksit Bharat goal, we need United States support. And a lot of United States support will come from private sector technology partnership, technology transfer, investments into the India. And I believe that he would be one of those persons that he could be the one who could actually be a bridge and play that facilitator role, because he will be working with the government, so he will know the bureaucracy in and out. At the same time, he is a private sector person, so he would bring that into the equation while in negotiations or in discussions with India. And I think you also mentioned when you were categorizing different subjects which were covered when there were sectoral meets with Prime Minister. And you rightly pointed out that he talked about innovation, entrepreneurship, investments into the India. I think having Elon Musk in current Trump 2.0 administration is the vantage point for India, I would say.
Indeed. Shubhendu, while we are waiting for, we are told that Prime Minister Modi will be reaching White House any moment now. We'll play out those visuals when they become available. But while we are waiting for that to happen, I want to go back to what you said something towards the end of your intervention there. You spoke about the personal rapport that Mr. Modi enjoys with world leaders, including President Trump. What should one make of the bonhomie or camaraderie or bromance, as some people call it, between the two principals, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump? PM Modi is one who invests a lot of time, energy and effort into establishing a rapport with world leaders. So can we expect them to build on what they have achieved so far in Trump 1.0 and build on it going forward?
Absolutely, Ramesh. I think two leaders who share a great comfort space with one another, who understand one another, and the trust factor in times like today where trust deficit is a sort of global problem among nations and leaders. In that sense, two leaders who've known the manner in which the other works and have confidence in one another can get cracking on action and agenda for both their respective governments. In that sense, it shouldn't be surprising us if there are some big ticket announcements as well. Both of them are focusing on innovation, on strengthening their own economies, strengthening their people, pumping up manufacturing in the country. In that sense, their priorities seem to be there is a lot of convergence, there is a lot of resonance in that, and the confidence in one another, in the worldview that they share. All of that contributes in making sure that the two administrations can work together in a more efficient manner. And when we refer to them as close global, close strategic partners, it's very, very important that every level of the government understands the other aspect of it. And when the top leadership share a great deal of comfort, great deal of confidence with one another, then it tends to also percolate to other departments, and we see that synergy playing out, and that synergy will be very, very crucial for both the countries in the days ahead. One example would be also because in this two-nation visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, his first stop was France, where advanced technologies such as AI was being deliberated, and that is one of the domains where India and the United States are likely to be key partners in the days ahead. In the recent times, we've seen the advances that China has made in this domain, the models that it has created more efficiently, that has put the Western nations, America in particular, in concern. So the manner in which these advanced technologies, critical emerging tech can be jointly created, jointly developed in a more efficient manner is something that would be interesting. And for the leaders to have a great rapport already together is the first big step already in working together in these critical areas of future cooperation.
Absolutely. Just to remind our viewers, we are just moments away from that much anticipated meeting, the handshake, a possible hug between the two principals, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, when the Indian leader reaches the White House for that meeting we're discussing about. May I take a moment to introduce my guest joining us on this broadcast. Joining me is Ambassador Atul Keshav. He is a president of the Washington, D.C. based U.S.-India Business Council. He is also a former diplomat who served in India. Ambassador Keshav, welcome to this special broadcast. Good to have you join this discussion. Like I said, we are waiting for that much anticipated meeting to take place, to begin at the White House. And while we are waiting for just that, may I ask you for your thoughts on the optics and the likely outcomes from this meeting?
Well, first of all, Ramesh, thanks for having me on the program. Great
Welcome.
to see you. First of all, we need to exult in the fact that within the first 25 days of President Trump's term, we have a visit by the Prime Minister of India. This would have been unimaginable 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or even 50 years ago when USIBC was founded. We have come a long way between Delhi and Washington, and I think it reflects the importance of India. It reflects the importance of US-India ties, and it reflects the warmth and friendship and mutual regard that President Trump and Prime Minister Modi have for one another. So I view this as a really a landmark day, and I'm quite happy to see the scenes that we're about to witness.
As I was asking my colleague in Washington, D.C., Ambassador Keshav, before you joined, about the much touted Modi-Trump bromance, what do you make of the camaraderie the two leaders enjoy? This emphasis on personalized diplomacy, does that hold the relationship in good stead going forward?
Well, personal chemistry is very important in diplomacy, and there are many, many examples of it throughout history. I recall that the personal chemistry during the nuclear deal between our two leaders was extremely important and helped break through some of the bureaucratic barriers that were limiting us. So I am actually very happy that the President and the Prime Minister have this personal chemistry, that they're going to continue it from the first Trump administration, and I am hopeful that it will help us achieve some good things in breaking through some of the limitations on the relationship and taking us to a new level. So chemistry is very important.
Right, Ambassador Keshav, Ambassador Bhattacharya, Mr. Kumar and Shubhendu, do stay on. I'll come back to all of you momentarily. Let me let me delve into the specifics of the relationship and focus on defense to begin with. Now, defense cooperation between India and the US is multifaceted. It includes a regular institutionalized bilateral dialogue, military exercises and defense procurements. The defense cooperation is based on what is known as the new framework for India-US defense cooperation, which was renewed for 10 years in 2015. In 2016, the defense relationship was designated as a major defense partnership. On July 30th, 2018, India was moved into Tier 1 of the US Department of Commerce's Strategic Trade Authorization License exception. At the apex of the dialogue mechanisms is the 2+2 ministerial dialogue, co-chaired by the Ministers of External Affairs and Defense on the Indian side and the Secretaries of State and Defense from the US. Now, the India-US Defense Industrial Cooperation Roadmap, which concluded in May 2023, seeks to fast-track technology cooperation and co-production in areas of mutual interest. Military-to-military exchanges take place through high-level visits, exercises, training courses, and regular service-specific bilateral mechanisms. Now, India has the largest number of military exercises with the US, which are only growing in scale and complexity. Right, talking about defense cooperation, Ambassador Bhattacharya, what do you make of the roadmap that both sides could possibly be working on, including, as I mentioned before, a new defense framework agreement is in the works, we are told?
So this is particularly one of the areas in which the two sides have made steady progress over the years, more so in the most recent years. The complexity of the geopolitical situation around us has become one of those imperatives which has brought India and the United States much closer together. And it is today, in a sense, a close bond between the two sides where it encompasses all aspects of a defense cooperation that should be there between very strong and stable strategic partners. The new understanding of the Indo-Pacific is one in which India and the United States play a particularly significant role, because as the geoeconomics has shifted, the geopolitics needs to respond to it. And I think in the ways that we have been able to combine the different aspects of the collaboration on our between our militaries in particular and the tail that goes behind the military in terms of the science and technology, the hardware production, is truly admirable. And finally, of course, when we do have the 2+2, which brings the defense and external affairs ministries together in a coordinated approach with the American side. So at every level, whether it is in terms of the philosophy of our defense cooperation or it's the actual mechanics of how our armies collaborate, we have come a long way. There is still further efforts to be made, and I'm sure the two leaders would be discussing many of that in the meeting ahead.
Indeed. Ambassador Keshav, from your vantage at the USIBC, what might be the next big idea in the defense relationship? Would US players be interested in giving a fillip or a big push to Prime Minister Modi's Make in India campaign?
Well, first, let me just compliment Ambassador Bhattacharya on his excellent overview. And let me add that I think there's a lot of promise. If you think, for instance, about drone warfare, about net-centric warfare, about applying artificial intelligence to enhancing the deterrent capability of our militaries, fighter jets, drones, and so much else besides, I think there's a lot we can do together. You know, we need to break through some of the bureaucratic barriers that limit us and hinder us, and we ought to look at complementary strengths. So if India can, for instance, make the hulls of warships faster than we can, but we can put in the electronics and the armaments in ways that are helpful and enhance the platform, then maybe we should work together, because our competitors are working very fast on things like shipbuilding and drone warfare, and therefore we need to move faster.
Mr. Kumar, Ambassador Keshav referred to what he calls bureaucratic barriers. So that gives me a perfect segue to my question to you. Talking about barriers, do you think the barriers to transfer of technology should also be removed?
Certainly, Dan, and that's what I think India would hope for, because if you look from the Indian point of view, this is it's the technology which they need to scale up the production. And that is something which I think Government of India is going to, discuss with the discuss with the United States government. They would want the technology transfer to happen. If not, then there could be a joint partnership where US companies invest in India, or Indian companies partner with US companies and invest in the US, or there is a co-production, as Ambassador Keshav mentioned. So yeah, and that transfer of technology, even though we're talking from defense perspective, it could also be used for other civilian purposes. Whether it's the field of energy, or whether it's trade or investments, technology partnership is something which India would strive for under this negotiations.
Okay, so as we wait for the meeting to begin at the White House between the two principals, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, let me dive deeper into another aspect or dimension of the relationship, and that is energy. Now, India and the US have a strong bilateral partnership in the energy sector in particular. In April 2021, an India-US Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 partnership was launched. It has two tracks: Strategic Clean Energy Partnership and Climate Action and Finance Mobilization Dialogue. The inaugural Climate Action and Finance Mobilization Dialogue meeting in September of 2021 in New Delhi was co-chaired by the then US Special Envoy on Climate and India's Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. The hydrocarbon trade was $13.6 billion in 23-24. The US joined the International Solar Alliance in 2021 and ratified it the very next year in 2022. The US is also a member of the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, or CDRI. Now, India participates in the Major Economies Forum hosted annually by the US as well. Now, in August 2023, India and the US launched what is known as the US-India Renewable Energy Technology Action Platform. Right. If I can talk to our guests more on the energy cooperation. Mr. Kumar, if I can come to you first, your thoughts on the roadmap or the road ahead to ramp up collaboration in energy, in clean energy, green energy, and generally in the various facets, including hydrogen, biofuels, and so on.
I think you rightly covered when you were giving an overview of what US-India's clean energy partnership is. But I believe that going forward, at least in the next 4 years, the clean energy partnership will revolve quite a lot around the nuclear energy. And it was also quite evident from the India's budget, where the government of India announced a 100 gigawatt target by 2047, and to have indigenously built small modular reactors, I think 5 SMRs by 2023. So that will be one of the pillars under which the clean energy partnership will evolve over the next years. We still have to wait and watch and see how US government's priorities evolve, especially on the green energy. As we know that at this point, all federal programs are under review. But it also helps that Elon Musk is part of the government, because he is very much with electric mobility, electric vehicles. He's a champion in this case for sustainable development. That's something which he also brought it up with the Prime Minister. So I would say that when US-India clean energy partnership going forward would hinge on use of technology. So AI would come in very prominently. Nuclear energy. With respect to biofuels and green hydrogen, there is a task force which already exists between DOE and the Government of India. But we still have to wait and watch and see how does the US priorities evolve in this current administration.
And talking about just that, Ambassador Keshup, talking about the US priorities, as Mr. Kumar put it there, from your vantage at the USIBC, what would you like to see happen in the near term insofar as civil nuclear energy cooperation is concerned? We keep hearing about small nuclear reactors. India has indicated it will revisit the liability laws going forward. Is there scope for doing more, especially from the American private sector companies in India in the near term?
Well, there's an enormous scope to do more, and I think American companies are best in world in terms of technology, and they're very eager to participate in India's energy evolution. If you think about it, India's made enormous progress in the past few years in ensuring energy supplies to its growing industries and its population, but there's always going to be more energy demand, especially in an era of artificial intelligence. We're seeing enormous uptick in the demand on national grids. So we can work on nuclear together. You mentioned the liability issue. This goes back to the point I made about some of the bureaucratic and policy and legal barriers that inhibit us. We need to work on this very seriously, because I think there are Indian companies that want to partner with American companies to establish modular nuclear reactors to power Indian industry, which is going to be very good for India. We also, I think, can look at oil and gas. You know, USIBC was very honored to host my dear friend, respected colleague, Minister Hardeep Singh Puri at the India Energy Week in Delhi yesterday. And American companies are happy to work with India on exploitation of hydrocarbon resources in India's offshore. But American companies can also ensure secure supply of oil and gas to India as India works through the future of its electricity consumption. So I'm quite bullish on this, and I hope that it will be a big feature of the discussions between the two leaders, and it may result in some very positive outcomes.
Ambassador Bhattacharya, when we talk about energy, we keep hearing about two contrasting visions or versions. We hear a Trump speak about drill, baby, drill, and Emmanuel Macron talk about plug, baby, plug. Be that as it may, can we expect India to commit itself to buying more LNG from the US towards the end of those delegation level talks?
Well, as a growing economy and as one of the fastest growing major economies in the world, India's energy needs will continue to expand, and we will need to have energy security and efficiency at the same time. And the kind of energy transformation that we are undergoing at present means that while we will continue to have large dependence on hydrocarbon fuels, we will increasingly turn in terms of proportion of energy consumption towards the renewables. On the hydrocarbons, as you have noted already in your opening remarks, we have already expanded our collaboration with the United States to the extent that we import a very large amount of our hydrocarbons from there. And in the kind of very fragile situation that we are in terms of the hydrocarbon market, there are two essential features. One is, of course, to expand our own hydrocarbon generation potential, which requires collaborations on exploration and exploitation. And the second is to secure long-term contracts, whether it's for oil or gas. And I think on all these, the collaboration with the United States will continue to develop and strengthen in the days to come. The second part, which I think is equally important, if not more so, will be the technology collaborations that will actually fuel the transformation in the energy sector that India desires to have, because the Americans have the capability, and today we are trying to provide the enabling legislative framework as well as the incentive mechanism in terms of policies that will make this collaboration much more viable, whether it be in nuclear or in hydrogen or in other renewable sources. So I do see that there will be a balance. A lot of it will go with the kind of targets that we have set for ourselves in terms of the energy transformation. And the US, I think, is aligned with these particular priorities. And there's so much scope for a growing nation that there will be enormous potential for specific collaboration between US companies and India.
Ambassador Kashyap, I know you're pressed for time. I'll come back to you momentarily for one last question. But if I may go across to my colleague Shubhendu for more on these various facets of the relationship. Shubhendu, we haven't spoken much about the diaspora yet. We saw them welcome Prime Minister Modi, and this become a trademark of sorts. Every time PM travels, he makes it a point to meet with the local Indian community there. Give us a sense of the excitement there, the sense of anticipation, so to speak, among the Indian Americans, including PIOs, persons of Indian origin living in the US.
Absolutely, Ramesh. In fact, earlier when we were talking about the bonhomie between President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, one would think of two mega diaspora-associated programs. First was the Howdy Modi program of 2019, and then President Trump came to India, the Namaste Trump program of 2020. We saw the manner in which the people in both the countries, the diaspora, are sort of excited about the partnership between the two countries and the two leaders. Yesterday, when Prime Minister arrived in Washington, D.C., and mind you, it's a chilly weather. It's sunny at the moment, but it had snowed day before. It was drizzling yesterday under the open sky. Many of these diaspora members had gathered for a couple of hours. They were chanting Prime Minister's name, chanting nationalist slogans, and waiting for Prime Minister to come. So despite the weather, people of all age groups had gathered outside of Blair House to welcome Prime Minister, and their excitement was palpable even when they heard that the arrival would be delayed by a few minutes. At the same time, one particular section of the diaspora, the Indian students studying in America, and mind you, that is one of the largest foreign student community in United States. There's some 3.3 lakh Indian students who study in America. Their expectations are also very high from this particular visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting President Donald Trump in the new term. The expectations also on the side of concerns around immigration. There are certain policy changes that are taking place, policy evaluation that are taking place that are creating some concerns in members of the diaspora. There is, of course, a separate issue of illegal immigration, but for legal immigration, for H-1B visa, for students today, professionals tomorrow, to have a clear path, those are some concerns which they shared with us, and they said that they really hope that the two leaders, given that they have such an excellent rapport, Prime Minister would be able to communicate the aspirations of thousands of Indian students who come here, entrepreneurs who want to create a future here and also contribute to the American economy as Indians often do, especially in the tech and medical sector. So those aspirations are also finding a voice at this very special moment when the two leaders, in fact, are just about to meet.
Absolutely. Ambassador Kashyap, before we let you go, why don't you talk to us a bit more about the Indian American community? Have they come of age, finally found their voice and become a force to reckon with in US politics?
Now that I've unmuted, thank you again, Ramesh, for the opportunity. Look, Indian Americans have every right to feel very proud. There are many prominent Indian Americans. They've achieved great things in this country, in our free society that rewards hard work and innovation and excellence. And yet there is still more to be done. If you think about it, we still need to develop the kind of institutions and advocacy organs that help guide and shape and provide thought leadership in terms of the political issues that are important to Indian Americans. These can include issues related to immigration, skilled immigration. They can also relate to our education and culture, and they can relate to the national security interests of the United States. I think about, for instance, the America-Israel Political Action Committee and others that are so much better staffed and funded and organized and vocal and voluble in terms of how they advocate for things that are of interest to the United States and the American people, and also to Israel. And I think that there is room for improvement for Indian Americans. We do need to get more organized. We have now, I think we're into basically the fourth or fifth generation since people moved to California from Punjab in the teens and 20s. So we need to develop these institutions, but it is always a joyful time when the leaders of our two countries, India and America, get together. There are 1.8 billion free people under those flags of America and India, and we need to work together to get all of our problems sorted so that we can really unleash the innovation and ambition of our citizens. So this is a great moment, and I wish both leaders every success on behalf of all of our people.
All right. On that note, Ambassador Keshav, may I thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts and insights with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Right, so we are approaching the end of the first hour on this special broadcast. We still have with us our guests, Ambassador Bhattacharya and Mr. Kumar, and also my colleague Shubhendu, who is in Washington, D.C., covering every aspect of the ongoing visit by the Indian leader to the U.S. We'll go back to our guests, and in the meantime, we're getting these latest shots of the Indian leader arriving at the White House for that much anticipated meeting with President Donald Trump. Let's watch these visuals of Prime Minister Modi arriving at the White House. So there we have it. Prime Minister Modi has reached the White House for a meeting with President Donald Trump. We were getting these visuals from White House where Prime Minister Modi would first sit down for a one-on-one meeting with President Trump, followed by a delegation-level talk. And like I said before, at the top of the hour, he will also be addressing a joint press conference with President Trump towards the end of those talks as well. If I can go back to our guests one more time on this segment of the broadcast. Ambassador Bhattacharya, your thoughts on the meeting that is taking place as we speak in the White House in terms of outcomes. You think it will tick all the right boxes for you in the next hour or so?
Excited and at the same time optimistic about this meeting. This is a meeting which is been made with very careful preparation. It marks a very significant point where India and the United States are engaging so early on in a new administration. And it also reflects the shared aspirations and hopes of how the two of them can contribute to not only each other's futures, but also to broader regional and global security issues. I know that President Trump and Prime Minister have a very close personal rapport, and I think the preparations have been made to transform that particular personal rapport into a broader understanding for the two countries. And I'm sure during the meeting they will come forward with new consensus that will be beneficial for both sides. I'm very, very optimistic.
Indeed. And Mr. Kumar, your thoughts on what to expect from that meeting with President Trump in terms of outcomes, especially from your vantage, who've been tracking the relationship from very close quarters?
Bhattacharya mentioned that I'm also optimistic about the meeting between the two leaders. And as I mentioned previously, I expect that there would be a new roadblock decided. I mean, between the two leaders, and that's what the job of the main leaders are, to give directions or to, in a way, to give a direction to the bilateral engagement between the two countries of what that would be for next 4 to 5 years. Because we remember this is the final term for President Trump in the office, and Prime Minister Modi's third term will also complete in 2029. So it's a kind of a coterminous term for both the leaders. So they would want to maximize on this partnership, the personal bonhomie that they have, the personal rapport they have built. So, and since the meeting is coming right at the very beginning, not even a month since President Trump has taken the office, the meeting is coming. So I expect a good roadmap from both sides, maybe something on trade, but a broad roadmap on trade, investment, energy, tech, defense, outlining or guiding, giving a guidance to for the further negotiations or further engagements between the two sides, and that should lead up to the Quad Summit, which India will host towards the maybe second half of the year.
All right, I'm told this is where I say thank you to you, Ambassador Bhattacharya, and you, Mr. Kumar, for joining us on this special broadcast. Thank you for your time, much appreciated. I still have with me my colleague Shubhendu Ghosh, who is standing by in Washington, D.C. for more on this developing story. Remember, just to recap for the benefit of our viewers, Prime Minister Modi has arrived at the White House for that much anticipated meeting with President Donald Trump. We'll get you the latest from that meeting in just a bit. But if I can go back to my colleague Shubhendu for more on those talks which are taking place as we speak. Shubhendu, if you are still with us and can hear me, you're discussing about the diaspora before we let our guests leave. I want to sort of build on that point. In your interaction with the diaspora there over the last several days in DC, Shubhendu, what are some of the expectations from this meeting in terms of maybe the immigration issue or the visa issue, or generally what the perception of India has gone up in the US, the elite circle, so to speak, over the last many decades?
That's right, Ramesh. For the diaspora, it was a double an opportunity to celebrate. They said it is always special when Prime Minister Narendra Modi comes calling to the United States, but this time over, he's going to be joined by President Donald Trump, who they also think is one of the best leaders in the United States from the India perspective. That they think that President Donald Trump values the kind of contribution that Indians make in the American society. In that sense, there is a great degree of confidence. There is also a certain celebratory note when they refer to President Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi coming together. But at the same time, besides these reasons to rejoice, there are some real concerns, especially with reference to immigration, as I mentioned earlier. There are thousands of Indian professionals who come to the United States. They sometimes come as students. When they want to stay here, find a job, make a future, there is a process through which visa and immigration works, H-1B. Their aspiration is that it is turned into a more merit-based system, not a lottery-based system. I was speaking to a student, a second-year MBA student yesterday, who says that she already has a multiple job offers from top US companies. She's she's going to be a business management graduate soon, but her fate hangs on the manner in which the H-1B visa lottery turns out. So she argued that the process should be made a little more systematic. There should be more certainty that brings in. Many of the students spend millions of rupees and to come to the United States, to pay the fees. There's a lot of investment in education in the United States. It's best in the world, but it's also expensive. So in that sense, when they make that kind of an investment, they seek more stability in terms of the opportunity that they can build upon. So that particular section of the diaspora in particular are hoping that Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump would together iron out these areas of concern. Otherwise, broadly, the diaspora is very, very excited about this first meeting of Prime Minister Modi in the new term of President Donald Trump, and they're quite confident that the decisions, the roadmap they present is going to be a win-win for people of both the countries.
Right, and just to recap again for the benefit of viewers tuning in, it is getting to 3 a.m. India time or 4:30 in the afternoon in Washington, D.C. And Prime Minister Modi has arrived at the White House for his meeting with President Trump. We'll get you the latest from that meeting in just a bit. But while we wait for our guests to join this second hour of our broadcast, we're expecting two more guests to join us in just a bit. But let me go back to my colleague Shubhendu, who is in DC as we speak, tracking every aspect of the visit of the Indian leader to the US. Shubhendu, talking a bit more about the diaspora. Now, we've heard some of the diaspora talk about how Prime Minister Modi has changed the perception of India in the US. India is seen as becoming a more confident country, more self-assured. It's a growing economy. It is pulling its weight on the world stage and becoming indispensable in some ways to resolving global issues. What are you supposed to make of the change in the mindset, in the way the Indian diaspora relates to India when it comes to the economy or its role in geopolitics?
That's right, Ramesh. It's a very informed diaspora here in the United States. In particular, we have to understand that, in fact, they're also very prosperous, they're educated in healthcare, in information technology. Their contribution is, in fact, higher than many other sections of population in the United States. And the particular aspects that you mentioned, that the rise of India that is being witnessed on the global stage, the rise of India within the country in terms of the economic prosperity that is reaching more and more people, they say that it adds to their confidence of carrying that brand India with them, whether it is the strength of the passport, whether it is an association with their leader. The many say that many foreigners recognize them by saying that, oh, so you are from the country represented by Prime Minister Modi. We see him on many global stages. India hosted the G20. All of these events and milestones have greatly contributed to the rise of India's stature on the global stage, and the manner in which the trickle-down impact and each individual Indian American also experiences that sense of empowerment, that sense of prosperity, that sense of stature. So that's what they shared, most of them, when they spoke about the manner in which India is rising under leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. They also referred to the manner in which in the American political system, and mind you, the Indian American population, if we compare it with the population of United States, a very small percentage, about 2% of the American population. But the great significant percentage of contribution that they're making to the Indian economy in key areas, as I mentioned earlier, in healthcare, education, in IT, their own stature, despite being small in number, it adds significantly to their confidence about India and their aspirations ahead. The number of Indian Americans who've made a name in Indian political system. Earlier, just before President Donald Trump came into power, there was Vice President Kamala Harris who had Indian roots. There's so many leaders and their families who have Indian roots in the new administration. So in that sense, there is also a sense that the American administration, especially President Trump's administration, takes that very, very optimistic and positive view of what Indians and Indian Americans bring to the table. And that adds to their sense of belonging, the sense of confidence, and their sense of dedicating themselves also to the prosperity of America. So that's an interesting aspect. When your country grows, your confidence grows, and you're able to contribute and with greater energy and with greater focus in also taking the ties between India and the US forward.
Right, a quick recap of the latest news. As my colleague Shubhendu is reporting, Prime Minister Modi has reached the White House for a meeting with President Trump, and in the last several hours we've seen him hold more meetings with members of the Trump 2.0 cabinet, including Elon Musk, Ramaswamy, Tulsi Gabbard, the intelligence chief of the US, and also the NSA Mike Waltz. He'll also be meeting several others in the hours ahead. And also we're told that the one-on-one meeting between the two principals has begun. We'll get you the latest visuals of that meeting in just a bit. And while we wait for our guests to join, Shubhendu, we've discussed so far about the diaspora, defense ties, energy ties. Let me now pull up some more news for our viewers, and this time let's focus on trade. The US is the largest trading partner of India. The total bilateral trade in goods and services was $199.1 billion in 2023. Talking about some more details about trade, if I can pull up some more data for our viewers. Now, during 2023-24, the US was the third largest source of FDI into India, with inflows of $4.99 billion, accounting for almost 9% of total FDI equity inflows. Established in 2005, the India-US Trade Policy Forum discusses market access and trade-related matters. The 14th such forum was held in New Delhi in January 2024. An India-US commercial dialogue focuses on cooperation in standards, ease of doing business, travel and tourism, and other important issues of commercial significance. It's co-chaired by India's Commerce Minister and the US Secretary of Commerce. The fifth commercial dialogue was held in New Delhi on 10th March 2023. Established in 2005, the India-US CEO Forum meets on the sidelines of the commercial dialogue and submits recommendations to the commercial dialogue as well. The CEO Forum was held in March 2023 in New Delhi. A joint working group on information and communications technology was set up in 2005 to bring together government and industry from both sides to discuss about cooperation in electronics and IT services. Last but not the least, led by India's Finance Minister and the US Treasury Secretary, the 9th Ministerial US Economic and Financial Partnership Dialogue was held in New Delhi in November 2022. And India joined the launch of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework in May 2022 along with 13 partner countries. Talking about trade, Shubhendu, what are some of the outstanding issues that we might encounter in the days ahead, and what do both sides, or how do both sides seek to overcome those hurdles?
Right, Ramesh, first compliments to you for in a very, very comprehensive manner. You presented the key milestones and the key highlights of India-United States trade relations. Yes, the US happens to be the largest trading partner of India. Initial years, we saw that position was taken by China, but in the recent days and years, it's the United States that is the largest trading partner of India in goods and services alike. But at the same time, when we look at the trade volumes, there is also concern about the trade deficit. Now, India has a surplus trade of about upwards of $40 billion. But this trade deficit for United States is a matter of concern given the certain tariff diplomacy that President Trump is focusing on lately. But that is also likely to be resolved through many different ways. There are ways in which trade deficits can be dealt with. You increase the overall volume of the trade. President Trump has already spoken about his expectations that defense equipments in particular could be increased as far as India's purchase from United States is concerned. There again, there is a certain issue of strategic autonomy that India would like to exercise. India is interested in advanced defense equipments, but it also wants to invest in co-development, co-production in the country where the best of America and India can work together in India to take it forward. So while the focus is going to be the highlights of the trade relations, it would be interesting to watch how the areas of strain are ironed out by the leaders, particularly vis-a-vis deficits and the tariff push that President Trump has been working on for the past some time. It's China that is facing the brunt as of now. Also the countries that export aluminium and steel to the United States, Canada being one of the leading countries that is going to be affected by those tariffs. But how does it play out with India? We'll have to wait and watch. It will be interesting. But yes, this trade partnership also forms the bedrock as far as the engagement between these two very exciting economies are concerned. One, the world's largest economy, and the other, one of the world's fastest growing large economies. So in that sense, all eyes on the manner in which these two leaders, when they meet today, how do they focus on those areas of concern? The engagement is already deep. Those areas of concern, an optimistic, productive, positive focus on that would go a long way in taking India-US ties forward.
Absolutely, Shubhendu. Now that we've discussed about trade as well, I'm told we're joined by our guest, Professor W.P.S. Sidhu. Dr. Sidhu is joining us from New York. He's the Center for Global Affairs at New York University. Professor Sidhu, welcome to this special broadcast. Good to have you join this discussion. Now, I was discussing with my colleague Shubhendu in DC about trade ties. Your thoughts on the way forward in tackling some of the outstanding issues insofar as trade is concerned?
Ramesh, wonderful to be here again, and good morning to you and your viewers there. Clearly, trade is going to be a very central aspect of this discussion between at the bilateral level. As we know, President Trump has taken a very, very particularly aggressive attitude towards trade in general and tariffs in particular. He's already, threatened some of his closest trading partners, but also a country like China, with which, they have a very different kind of competitive relationship as well. So in that context, I think, Prime Minister Modi is also landing on the day that President Trump is going to outline his reciprocal tariff idea. As we heard from your colleague, clearly India has been very aware of this and in some ways already preparing for some of this as well. The reduction of duties on American-made motorcycles is a very interesting approach. In the same context, the conversation now with Elon Musk is going to be equally important, particularly if it leads to the manufacturing of Tesla cars in India. It would raise the question of, will these cars also be impacted by tariff, especially if they're coming into the United States, or are they only meant for the Indian market? There are different ways that India and the US can approach this, but I broadly agree that it's likely to be much, much more cooperative, much, much more convivial, than the kind of more threatening tones that we've heard. And there are already various ways that this might work out. One of them is India stepping up its import of liquefied natural gas from the United States. I believe it's at about 6% of India's total requirements at the moment, and there's talk of doubling that to about 15%, or more than doubling it to about 15% or so. So there are ways that I think this trade aspect could be addressed by both sides, and clearly the bonhomie on both sides is adequate to want to try and address that.
Talking about trade, Professor Sidhu, if I may quickly recap what a US official has said in the run-up to the Modi-Trump meeting. I'm quoting or paraphrasing from a news report. It highlights or flags 5 different issues. One, it talks about the US wanting to bring down the US trade deficit with India, number 1. Number 2, it's hoping for a fair bilateral trade deal. Number 3, to build on defense sales. Number 4, prioritizing American technology. And last but not the least, signing a new defense framework. Your thoughts on the bridging the trade deficit and this new trade deal that's in the works?
Well, certainly, I think if you look at point number 3 and point number 5 of that list that you've just shared with us, it's quite clear that India is very keen on diversifying its defense procurement worldwide. It certainly does not want to be beholden only to Russia or even to France. And certainly, as we've again heard from your colleague and others as well, there is a lot of attraction towards US defense equipment and deals. There are, of course, 3 issues there. Number 1, cost. Number 2, transfer of technology. And number 3, that there is some equipment that the United States is not going to be comfortable selling to India. It's only reserved for the closest allies. And India does not obviously fall into that category. And so that may be a little bit of a challenge. But that being said, we've already sort of seen areas where you can see India stepping up its defense procurement from the United States, and the desire on the part of the United States also to either co-produce or indeed sell in that area. So I think that could very well be linked up with this closer defense cooperation that is being talked about. The other idea may also be for the US and India to manufacture together to sell to third countries. This is not a new idea. It's an idea which has been around for decades, and it may be worth thinking about and reviving in many different ways as well. Simply to put this into context, I mean, if you look, for example, at the India-US bilateral trade and the India-China bilateral trade, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the deficit is far less with the United States than it is with China. And there, I think there's a greater possibility of that deficit being balanced with the United States than it is necessarily with China. And clearly what's important from the statement that you just read out, that not only is the United States keen on ensuring this kind of cooperation, they're also laying out a very clear pathway as to how this might move forward.
Right. If I may take a moment to welcome our second guest joining us on this special broadcast. We have with us Mr. Akshat Singh, an Associate Fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Mr. Singh, welcome to this special broadcast. I don't know whether you could hear me talk to Professor Sidhu there, but we're discussing about two key issues confronting India and the US. One was trade and the other is defense. A third, possibly proverbial elephant in the room would be the Indo-Pacific quote for China, some would say. And in that context, if I can repeat what a US official has said in a media briefing just a short while ago, the official says they expect continued cooperation with India on potential Chinese security issues. What might they be?
Ramesh, I was very keenly and intently listening to the conversation, and I agree with whatever Professor said. I feel one thing that we need to understand with the bilateral partnership moving forward is that it will be based on the premises of reciprocity and immediate reciprocity, right? Until now, the US foreign policy was hinged on long-term strategic vision, where US, through its instruments and agencies such as USAID, would try to establish cordial relationships with the country and try to bargain those cordial relationships 15, 20 years in the future. Now we will move towards, at least for the duration of the next administration, move towards a phase where the relationship between countries will be extremely, extremely reciprocal. Now, on the subject of China, China cannot be looked at in isolation. China cannot be looked at as just China, right? China needs to be understood in the context of larger Indo-Pacific and the historical context that has already been set. Now, when I think about US, India, and China and the partnership between these three countries, I think of a seesaw, right? These three countries can be placed at any position in that seesaw. And the minute two countries start getting closer, the third country feels alienated and starts acting out. Currently, US and India are getting closer, which of course puts China at unease. A few months ago, when India and China signed the border deal, trying to ease off some of the tensions out there, Washington started getting a little worried and angsty. Similarly, if US and China go back to the era under President Obama and start getting a little cozy, it will naturally cause some discomfort in India. Now, one natural thing that we need to understand is, number one, China is aggressive, and China continues to be aggressive despite repeated preferences and despite repeated attempts of the global world order to bring it into the fold, right? We saw under President Obama this mindset about how if China is made part of a globalized world, it will start behaving a little better, but that didn't really happen. China has openly desecrated agreed upon conventions such as the UN Convention on Law of the Seas. China is in active territorial expansion, trying to cover territories of Bhutan, trying to cover territories of India. and simultaneously expanding in the Indo-Pacific as well. However, if we start thinking about decoupling from China, it is not a 5-year project. It is not a 10-year project. China has gained strategic advantage in some critical areas, and taking that advantage back will require not only bilateral but multilateral cooperation, which brings me to the subject of Quad. There have been repeated attempts under at least the past 3 to 4 administrations to strengthen bodies to compete against China in strategic areas. When we talk about emerging technology, we think about 3 different components of emerging technology, right? We think about AI, which is dependent on semiconductors and chips. We talk about electric vehicles, which is dependent on motors and permanent magnets. And we talk about critical minerals. And across these 3 areas, China has gained an upper hand. Perhaps in the subject of chips, most of it is concentrated in Taiwan, but China is already moving towards good infrastructural design, good chip design. And therefore, combating China is not going to be a 5-year project. Combating China is going to be a multi-generational project. The people who think that people thinking China is aggressive are China hawks are wrong. China is a real threat, and this threat will need to be addressed if we want to maintain the global liberal world order that we currently live in.
Fair enough. Professor Sidhu, talking about the Indo-Pacific, India will host the Quad Summit later this year, and President Trump can be expected to visit India for that summit. Given Trump 1.0's predisposition to China and all things China, especially given the security strategy and the defense policy unveiled in Trump 1.0, can we expect the Trump 2.0 to build on that going forward, and what would that mean for India and the world at large?
Ramesh, that's an excellent question, and I think I'd like to contextualize this. I think you had mentioned this in one of your earlier programs as to how it was in fact President Trump who had revived the Quad. And then, of course, President Biden, in his presidency, took it much further and much faster and much deeper than it has ever been before. And I think President Trump coming back to that is really going to build on that in the context of the Quad as being something which is forward-looking, is a good news, and in some ways also a different kind of partnership. You know, the alliance model of NATO is now passé, certainly even within Washington, D.C., as we just heard from Vice President J.D. Vance, as to their take on what NATO's position would be, for example, on Ukraine. And so I think it's very important to keep that in mind as we talk about how the Quad is now rising in prominence. And let me articulate for you 3 or 4 elements of why the Quad is already become significant. Number one, at the inauguration, where Foreign Minister Jaishankar was there was already a Quad foreign ministers meeting. This, I believe, was even before any similar meeting with any of the US allies, and certainly including NATO as well. Number 2, the first visitor to come to the Trump White House was the Japanese Prime Minister. And that again underlines, if you like, the priority that this administration is putting on the Indo-Pacific. And it is no coincidence that the 4th world leader to attend or be in Washington, D.C. is, of course, Prime Minister Modi. So it is all very much building up towards reinforcing the idea of the Quad, and really kind of putting Indo-Pacific up front and center. That being said, I think it's also very important to recognize that the 4 members have very different approaches towards China. As you know, the common phrase that you see in all of the joint statements is a free, fair, open Indo-Pacific for everybody. But beyond that, India certainly is not in the business of containing China. It cannot, as we've heard, the limitations of that as well. But it also does not want to do that. It probably wants to manage China. which is why it remains, in some ways engaged with China through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or the BRICS and the BRICS Plus as well. Now, the United States may have a more different dynamic with China, and there India can certainly go along on the global dimensions of the India-China competition, if you like. But I don't think that is going to necessarily benefit the India-China bilateral competition, or indeed even the regional competition vis-a-vis China's role and engagement in Pakistan as well. So clearly, President Trump may have an expansionist idea of Quad vis-a-vis China, but I think it may well be limited to what the other three partners are likely to do. And we've already seen an indication of that in the creation of the AUKUS, which is the Australia, UK, and US partnership to build nuclear-powered submarines, where India, either by accident or design, is not part of that discussion at the moment. So I think we will probably see the Quad's ideas being reinforced. But what will remain a little bit of a question mark in the summit going forward is whether the defense leg or the military or the security leg of the Quad is going to be reinforced, or will Quad remain that broad kind of dialogue which looks right from outer space to 5G technology to health and even climate change concerns being addressed together. That remains a big question mark.
Indeed. Professor Sidhu, you've given us a lot of talking points. They will come to some of them in just a bit. Professor Sidhu, Mr. Singh, do stay on. I'll also ask my colleague Shubhendu to stand by. We'll come back to you momentarily. Let me pull up some more news for the benefit of our viewers tuning in. And this has to do with the meetings that have already taken place this morning in Washington, D.C. To begin with, US NSA Mike Waltz called on Prime Minister Modi in Washington, D.C. Their discussions touched upon ways to further deepen the India-US comprehensive global strategic partnership. Now, this had a focus on strategic technologies as well as defense industrial cooperation and civil nuclear energy, with an emphasis on small modular reactors and counter-terrorism. They also discussed about international and regional issues of mutual interest. The head of the US Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, and the CEO of Tesla, Elon Musk, called on Prime Minister Modi. Prime Minister Modi and Musk discussed strengthening collaboration between Indian and US entities in innovation, space exploration, artificial intelligence, and sustainable development. Their discussion also touched upon opportunities to deepen cooperation in emerging technologies, entrepreneurship, and good governance. Musk was accompanied by his family to the meeting. Next, entrepreneur and politician Vivek Ramaswamy called on the Indian leader in Washington, D.C. They spoke about diverse issues, including innovation and culture, among others. They had insightful discussions on India-US ties, biotechnology, and the role of entrepreneurship in shaping the future. Ramaswamy was accompanied by his father-in-law to this meeting. And the US Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, called on the Indian Prime Minister as well. Prime Minister Modi fondly recalled his past interactions with her. Their discussions touched upon enhancing bilateral intelligence cooperation, particularly in counter-terrorism, cybersecurity, emerging threats, and strategic intelligence sharing. They also exchanged views on regional and global developments of mutual interest, reaffirming their commitment to a secure, stable, and rules-based international order. Right, going back to our guests who are with us on this special broadcast, Professor W.P.S. Sidhu and Mr. Akshat Singh, also my colleague Shubhendu Ghosh, who is standing by in DC. Professor Sidhu, your thoughts on this meet and greet that the PM had with members of Trump 2.0 cabinet, including the NSA, Elon Musk, the man for all seasons, as some people call him. He is everywhere. One day he is berating leaders of Germany or Britain or South Africa. The next day he is talking about corruption in the US aid and talking about cutting down the government bureaucracy. How should one, what should one make of Elon Musk in Trump 2.0?
That's a very difficult question to answer, but let me pull back a little bit, Ramesh, and start by answering in the following way. If you look at the history of Indo-US summits over say the Modi era, and both during Trump 1 and Biden's time as well, you could characterize them as being A, B, and C. They were with the administration. But they were not only with the administration, they were also with B for business. And that's been a very important part for India. This is not something new, but also, the last part has definitely been the civil society or the Indian diaspora. And all three of them have been equally crucial for India and for the bilateral relationship. Now, the advent of Elon Musk in kind of now being part of both A and B is an interesting proposition, and in one that is still being played out. As you may have seen and your viewers may have seen, many of the steps that he's taken domestically, particularly vis-a-vis USAID, of which, by the way, India was one of the beneficiary countries in the past, as well as now the Department of Education, we believe Department of Defense and the Pentagon is also in the sites, has turned out to be quite controversial, to put it mildly. There are several cases. There are many other issues going through there. There's also been some discussion of conflict of interest in terms of business. And so it's a new landscape. It's something that India and Indian leaders will have to maneuver very, very carefully. And I think Prime Minister Modi has done a good start by talking about Musk as the entrepreneur, and talking about Tesla and the possibility of setting up a Tesla plant in India, which in some ways does not necessarily tie up with his cabinet position, as it were. But I think it will become a little bit more clear in the coming days as to what exactly that mandate is, how that's going to play out. But until then, I think it's better for India and Indian leaders to be more cautious and, of course, meet people right across the board. That is crucial, but not necessarily to put all their eggs in the Musk basket.
Indeed. Mr. Singh, when we see these visuals of Vivek Ramaswamy calling on Prime Minister Modi, or Tulsi Gabbard calling on him, or keep hearing about Kash Patel, who is nearly getting to be confirmed by the Senate. We have 6 Indian American lawmakers now in the US legislature. Does that speak to the growing or the rising profile of the Indian American community in the US? Will they, or do they add more ballast to the relationship? Are they what is known as the living bridge, so to speak, to strengthen the relationship between India and the US?
Absolutely. I feel that the people-to-people ties aspect of the US-India bilateral relationship often is underrated. The mutual trust between the two countries has been established by a large, successful diaspora group. I'm sure your viewers already know the stats, but Indian Americans living in the US currently form the highest median wage group in the nation. So, of course, they are economically and politically influential. Apart from the names that you mentioned, an interesting nomination came just last night, which is the nomination for the Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asia. Also a gentleman of Indian origin, Mr. Paul Kapoor, who was formerly at the Hoover Institution. This was the role that was previously held by Mr. Donald Lu. It is a key position in the State Department. And we know that key appointments such as Kash Patel, key appointments such as Vivek Ramaswamy, key appointments such as Mr. Paul Kapoor, have the dual effect of assuaging the Indian diaspora in the US, as well as signaling to India that it is an important bilateral partner. Another example of the same can be if we go back to the inauguration day, where due to rains, the venue for President Trump's inauguration was suddenly moved indoors and therefore limited. We saw the External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, seated in the first row, right? In politics, where real estate is very, very important, that signaled something key. That signaled how valuable the US-India partnership was. And then the first bilateral meeting that Secretary Rubio had was with Dr. Jaishankar. The first multilateral meeting was of Quad foreign ministers. So I feel that all these elements do play a very, very important role. Apart from that, if we see on both parties, be it Democrats or be it Republicans, the diaspora groups have done a tremendous job in moving beyond just the diaspora and providing much needed capital in the form of political action committees, right? Supporting Indian American candidates, which is why we've suddenly seen a resurgence of that. And right now, we're just talking about the Hill, right? Apart from Washington as well, when we look at state legislatures, we've seen an uptick in the number of Indian American legislators. And I think that is definitely a positive signal.
Indeed. And while we are waiting for more information on the Trump-Modi talks taking place as we speak at the White House, I'll request a guest to stay on. If I can go back to my colleague Shubhendu. Shubhendu, we're discussing about the growing profile of the Indian diaspora. In that context, talking about the meetings PM has had so far, including with Musk, what are you picking up about Musk's interest, possibly going forward, of making Tesla or SpaceX or Starlink enter India, number one? And number two, we've seen both Musk and Vice President J.D. Vance travel with their respective families. Is there a particular messaging involved there to showcase one's family, being a normal family man, as it were, with one wife or spouse and the children as well?
Absolutely. Let me answer your second question first, Ramesh. This whole gesture of taking your family along also speaks volume about the manner in which you look at the guest who has come calling in your country. The rapport that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has with President Donald Trump, the warmth that he shares, his immediate team can see that. And perhaps this is also a gesture to sort of amplify that idea that with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, with an Indian leader, it is going to be a close, warm, intimate relationship. And therefore, the gesture of getting the family, little children, alongside also speak volumes about the manner in which this relationship, the direct relationship between leaders, is seen. Now, talking about Elon Musk, Prime Minister did mention in his Twitter account on X, he mentioned that he had fruitful talks with Elon Musk on areas where we know he specializes, innovation, mobility, to name a few. We'll also have to see that this time that Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets Elon Musk, he meets Musk in a new role. Before this, he's met Elon Musk, the entrepreneur, someone who has made his name in space technology, in electric mobility, and so on. But this time, he is part of the Trump government. So in that sense, there is a significant transformation as far as Elon Musk's stature in the American corridors of power is concerned. So Elon Musk would also want to use his expertise, his ideas in innovation, mobility and other areas while he engages with the world leaders. So in that sense, there is significant convergence between India and United States, but there are areas of strategic autonomy that India would want to preserve. We know that, in the past, the manner in which the Tesla plant, its sort of creation in India got a setback because India was pushing for Tesla manufacturing in the country, and Tesla wanted to import most of it from the plants that it already has in China. But now Elon Musk, we must understand, is in a position of greater influence. So apart from celebrating the close ties that we are between India and United States, these are some areas also where India would have to look out for to make sure that its interests are well protected.
Indeed. Professor Zhu, while all attention is focused on Musk, I have to ask you this. I want you to weigh in on Tulsi Gabbard. Now, this is one person who was branded as a Russian apologist not so long ago. And today she's been confirmed as the DNI chief. And it coincided with Trump making outreach to Putin and Zelensky to end the Ukraine-Russia conflict. You think it came not a day late for her? It came as a vindication of sorts, given the U.S. attempts to build on a rapprochement, as it were, with Russia, or between Russia and Ukraine on the other hand?
I think there is a great element of continuity between the various administrations. So if you look, for example, at the Biden administration and then moving on to the Trump administration, you will see a fair amount of continuity. But there have also been some significant areas of change. And this perhaps is probably the most apparent of the lot, in the sense of the opening up to Russia, the kind of approach to Russia. And this, in a way, I think is more reflective of Trump really not being ideologically based and being more transactional based. So, and therefore the approach of the America First ideology, if there is indeed that kind of an ideology, it is to take strategic autonomy in your positions and to be transactional where it sees you serving the American interest first. And this you've seen played out most clearly in the case of Russia and Ukraine as well. So yesterday, for example, the new defense secretary essentially said Ukraine cannot join NATO, and there is not going to be necessarily an American troops on the ground at all. It would be for the Europeans to take care of Ukrainian security if they were so interested. This, of course, is likely to be music to Putin's ears, but also opens up all kinds of opportunities for the United States to have different kinds of transactions in different parts of the world. And I think it's in that context that Tulsi Gabbard's appointment needs to be seen as well. And I think, the fact that she is bringing in this slightly more radical approach, if you like, to foreign, to support the foreign policy of Trump is perhaps one of the reasons why she is part of the cabinet. Now, there is, of course, a lot of consternation and concern among the various more traditionalist intelligence folks, not so much necessarily for the change or transition, because of course, even at the best of times, the U.S. intelligence folks have been negotiating with their, with countries with which they have less than friendly relations and more contentious relations. So for example, we saw the previous NSA negotiating with the Chinese, the previous CIA chief doing the same with Russia. So that's not necessarily new. But I think what is relatively new is this opening up, if you like, of possibilities and opportunities where the others did not make it more overt. And I think that's going to be a fundamental change as well. And it remains to be seen whether this is going to lead to closer intelligence sharing between India and the United States. There was already some, but it was never at the level that, for example, the United States had with the Five Eyes. And does this in fact mean that there's going to be a retrenchment between the US intelligence sharing with the Five Eyes as it sort of increases with India?